G'day, and welcome to Down Under Interviews. I'm Paul Rushworth-Brown, and today we're diving into a story that walks a line between war, memory, and the choices that shape a life. My guest is author Dave Mason, author of Between the Clouds and the River. This novel, it's a multi-generational journey that begins in the shadow of World War II and flows all the way into the turbulent 1960s through a young boy named Joseph, whose life takes a turn no child should ever have to face. Dave weaves those timelines together with the truth and sensitivity that stay with you long after you close the book. So let's get into it, and here's my conversation with Dave Mason. Hi, I'm Paul Rushworth-Brown, author of Down Under Interviews, History, Bards, and Meet the Author in the US. And we're here with an amazing author today, Dave Mason, who's written a fantastic book. Dave, when I was looking into your novel, I was a little bit confused, I must admit. You've got sort of like a young child in 1965 or a teenager in 1965 as one character, and then you've got a German soldier in World War II as another character. The first thing that comes to mind, I love it, is that I sort of like get the feeling that there's a twist in there somewhere, but I don't want you to spoil it for everybody else. So just tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. It's nice to be here. And the book, the germ of the idea really came about when I read about a guy who was living in, I think he was living in Hawaii in the 1980s. And he put up his hand one day and said, "Hey, I'm not who I said I was. I'm not Bob Smith," or whatever his name was. He's like, "My name's Helmut," whatever. He's a German soldier who'd escaped from a prisoner of war camp in, I think, Nebraska or somewhere like that in the United States, and lived a lie for 45 years.
Wow.
And, you know, I read that article. I had the same reaction. I was like, wow, you know, how the implications of that are huge on so many levels, especially on his family, who just found out they're not what they think they are either. And then I started thinking about, well, does that really matter? You know, what really matters when it comes to family? So, you know, you're right to be a little bit, you know, your suspicions are correct. These two characters, you know, their lives are intertwined, but but how they're intertwined came about after thinking about this actual guy and what his family might have gone through following that revelation.
Wonderful. So Bernhard Lang, he basically goes through this process of as we've said, he's a second World War II soldier. He goes through this process of reinventing himself. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that without sort of like putting any spoilers out there?
Well, it's kind of hard to explain it without spoilers, so I'll do my best. But but Bernhard, when we meet him, he's a young guy, and he's basically been drafted into the German military, and his father's one of these hard charging, you know, let's go kind of guys. And but he's not really that way. He's lived a life of doing what he's told, and had a life that's prescribed to him. So he ends up, you know, in a place he never probably could have imagined ending up, which is the North African desert. You know, when he's fighting a bunch of Aussies and Kiwis and Brits and Indians and whoever else. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing there, but he's there. And through that process, he's captured. And, you know, he ends up.
I think it might be best to leave it there. I don't just spoil.
Yeah, I you know, he ends up in another place, you know, that he could never have imagined either. And that which leads to a life he never could have imagined. And I think my intent with that was, well, how many of us have had that experience? You know, like, you know, as a kid, I was born in England. My parents, you know, moved me to Canada when I was 8. And then, you know, I moved to the United States when I was in my 30s. Some of that was me intentionally, and some of it was me being taken these places. But, you know, the shape of my life, you know, came about through a bunch of different forces. And that, you know, the same thing happens to Bernhard. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I was born in England. And went to high school in Canada. I spent sort of like 10 years there going to in Canada, in Toronto, and then moved out here to Australia in the what was it, about 1982. So I've lived a similar life. Okay, so
well, you've done the accent. I mean, it's pretty impressive, you know.
Yeah, it was the same moving from England to Canada. For some reason, I just adopt, especially as a young guy. You know, you just like adopt because you don't want to be different. So.
No, you're a chameleon. You become what you have to become. And that's what happens with Bernhard. Yeah.
Okay. Good association. So the young man, Joseph Holliman, he has a difficult life, doesn't he?
He does. I'm fortunate. I had, what do they say? Choose your parents well, right? So I was pretty lucky. I lucked out in the parent department, and Joseph did not.
Right.
And he's living a life that really no kid should have to endure.
Yeah.
But he has no choice. He's a kid,
Yep.
and so there's parallels between him in 1960s Western Canada, and there's Bernhardt, who was a kid in 1930s Germany, living a life that's prescribed, and you're stuck with what you got. So the parallels are there, and how they weave together was the fun part.
Okay, and there's a. I mean, I've got a. I mean, I love twists and turns. I just love it. But there's actually a third character, isn't it, Frank? But I sort of like get the feeling that he might be involved with one of those twists and turns. So I'm not going to talk too much about him, unless you'd like to.
Sorry, it's a difficult book to talk about without revealing spoilers, because there are so many kind of twists and turns.
Yeah.
And revelations, I guess, is the term I would use.
So when you write, just getting away from the story for a moment, when you write, do you plan it all out, or do you just write?
I wish I had a good answer for that, because I think the answer is yes. I do both.
Right. Okay.
I know you're an author yourself, and you probably got your own way of going about it. When I wrote my first novel, I'd never written anything like that before in my life. I've written for my clients. I've been in the communication business for 40 years. But I hadn't written for fun since about third grade, in Canada. Right. And
because you've written a number of books now, haven't you?
I've written 2 so far. One word is the second one. So when I wrote the first one, I literally had no idea how to go about writing a book. So I just sat down and started writing. It was a similar thing. I'd read a news article about something that got my attention and spurred me to write. And it just kind of happened. I didn't plan it out per se. I found the weirdest thing was that, I'm a bit of a control freak in real life, so, I found that when you create characters, these fake human beings, and you think you can tell them what to do. And you kind of can to some extent, but then after a while, they start telling you, no, I wouldn't do that. I would do something else. Because by then they're fully formed people in your head. And there's this weird tug of war that goes on. So it's a bit, it's both rewarding and frustrating, because I thought I could control them better than I could. But so, they end up writing their own stories in a way. You just put them into these circumstances. And then, as you mentioned, Frank or Bernhardt or Joseph, you just ask yourself, what would those people do now that you know them? How would they react in the circumstances? And so that's really my process. I knew where I wanted to go with the story. As I mentioned at the beginning, this whole scenario where this guy had escaped and lived a lie, it really got into issues surrounding, citizenship and immigration. What does that mean? This guy, this Bernhardt guy, has a strange immigration and citizenship story, to say the least. And so I knew I wanted to touch on those things. I didn't quite know how I was going to do it until I did it.
Yeah. Okay. So you were saying before that you lucked out when it came to sort of like your upbringing and your parents and that type of thing. How difficult? I mean, the young man has obviously a difficult life. How difficult was it to write about his sort of like emotional, I suppose, problems and the things that in his life that were making his life difficult?
Well, I think it's a case where, I've never been a soldier in World War II either, so I don't know how that works. I've spoken to a few, and I've known a few. I've had friends who had difficult childhoods, growing up.
Yeah.
But I wasn't dumb. I had to just imagine how god awful that would be, and kind of try my best to present someone who's credible to the reader. And for anybody who's gone through that kind of crap and lived that that kind of existence, I just did my best to kind of remember some of the kids I'd known, and just try to be empathetic and put myself into their shoes, same as any other character. But I hope I did it justice.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned to you, I'm a high school teacher, and one of the things when we do our professional development is we learn about the backpack that kids carry, right? And what's inside that backpack can vary from sort of like child to child, and you've got to take that into consideration when you're dealing with them. So, things like neglect and family issues, sometimes even, violence and that type of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So what was your favorite character to write?
Who's your favorite kid, right? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think I have a favorite. I just, I tried to write these characters as honestly as I could.
Yeah.
They're female characters, and obviously I'm not a German soldier, and I'm not a 10-year-old kid, and I'm not a female in the situations either. So again, you do your best to create a rounded person who's credible, and hopefully I hit that nail on the head. I think the favorite thing is impossible to answer. I think it's the beauty is when the story knits together. You've got these credible characters, and the story knits together in a way that's absolutely credible, and the relations are made, and then you've created characters that are quote unquote real, and so I'm probably dodging your question.
You are.
yeah. I can't answer.
No, that's fine. Look, I just recently released my latest novel, Outback Odyssey, and one of the characters in that is an Aboriginal elder, and he's not the main protagonist, but he was such a wonderful character to write, and nothing sort of I'm not going to go into it too much, but nothing like when you see an Aboriginal elder here. A lot of sort of like white Australians, they have this preconceived idea about who they are and what they are. Whereas writing this character, he was wise. He was obviously very connected to the bush and all that type of thing. And I just love that. I mean, he has quite a big role, which is different because quite often in Australia novels, Aboriginal and First Nations people are actually marginalised, right? They're not sort of like the main character, but this guy plays a very important role with the main character. So just like with the like doing research on the on Aboriginal culture, reading anthropological texts from the 1800s about their culture and about their initiation rites and all that type of thing. It was just fascinating to write him. It was fascinating.
Yeah. I think it's a tribute to any author who can, effectively put themselves in that person's head and in their heart, and write in a way that I believe that person is real. If you give me no reason to think that person is not real, then you've done your job. And if you had fun doing it, there's a Native American character in my book, and I do know quite a few Native Americans and First Nations in Canada, and so but I have my preconceived notions as well. So I tried not to, I hope I didn't, fall prey to any of the stuff that I hoped I wouldn't fall prey to, But I think it's a tribute to anybody that can create a character who you feel viscerally as a real person. And, that's always fun, no matter who it is.
Yeah, you just answered my question, by the way.
Okay. Which was?
What was your favorite character to write?
Oh, he's up there, but there's a female character who I also, I don't know how you do it, but I steal from my own life, and I model characters on people I've known, or and so she's modeled on one person in particular that I've known, and I had a great time writing her too. I hope I got that right.
Yeah. Okay, so the setting or the landscapes for the novel, North Africa, Montana, British Columbia. Mm-hmm. Have you been to all those places?
I have not been to North Africa, but I live in Montana now, and I basically grew up in British Columbia after I moved west from Montreal when I was a kid with my family. So I've been all over BC and quite a bit of Montana and all the western states, and those locations really came about because of the number of prisoners of war who were actually kept in these places.
Okay.
I don't think people know the scale of the prisoner of war population of the United States and Canada during the Second World War, or that they were working paid workers who replaced the guys who'd gone overseas to fight them. And so those locations really came about because of that. And then of course my familiarity with them doesn't hurt either.
Yeah. Okay. So Bernhardt, Frank, and Joseph, what connection do you really want readers to? How do you want them to connect with those characters?
Well, they're disparate characters. They live in different times and places, but they have universal challenges. They all battle with the same things. And so my hope is that we always think of there's us and them, and there isn't us and them. There's just us. Yeah. And the them part is artificial. It's manufactured. And you're a perfect example of that. You were born in England. What part of England were you? Kent. I was born just outside Coventry. Okay. So if you live in one place, well, you're supposed to root for this football team, not the other one. We put all these artificial things around us because we're tribal, at our basis, right? And so my hope in the story is that it breaks down a little bit of that, the artificiality of it, and especially when it comes to notions of citizenship and nationality, because those are artificial. Borders change. It's history changes the tribe you're in without your permission, and guess what? Your life has changed. So my hope in writing those characters and interweaving them the way I did was kind of break down those ideas a little bit. They're firmly entrenched in human nature and not going anywhere. But maybe just for a second you can think, wait a second, this kid living this shit life in British Columbia, how's he any different really than this kid living this shit life in Germany, 1939?
Well said. Kind of yeah. Okay. All right. So why are people going to buy it? Why should they buy it?
Well, I think the hope is that it's it's not the first World War II story ever written. That's for damn sure. So the world doesn't really need another one of those. But it's a different take on what that meant on a very personal level. And also on a geopolitical level. But really, geopolitical events they all boil down to personal, don't they? Just depends where you are on which side of that. So I hope I wrote a book that would intrigue someone to read about the personal lives of just this handful of characters as they try to navigate the world they've been handed. They didn't create it per se. They played a little role in creating it. Frank, to some extent, tried to create his own world within the world that had been created for him. So, I hope people can relate to that as they kind of go through their own lives. And hopefully the story is entertaining and a little bit informative and a little bit thought-provoking. I hope, that it gets you thinking about some of these issues that we've just talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by that whole idea of sort of like, World War II and, this 12-year-old boy that's, 1965 and sort of like, was it difficult to, that whole sort of like change in decades, was it difficult to do? Did you find it difficult to sort of like, no?
No, it's, I think, the 1965 part was pretty easy because that was my childhood. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, so it wasn't that much of a stretch to put myself back then. Joseph's a little bit older than me, but not that much older. So, and I had parents who, their cities were bombed, they lived through the war. My father was training to be a pilot when the war ended. And luckily they didn't need them, so they said, thanks for coming, but take the rest of the day off. And so my life was changed by that. Right. So it's not that difficult. When you read historical fiction, for me anyway, that takes place in, medieval times or that to me that's a magic trick because it's hard for me to get my head around that. I was born close enough to those events that I could put myself in those events a little bit, or imagine my parents in those events, and that probably made it easier.
Yeah, right. Okay, so Dave, this is my favorite part of the interview. So what I'm going to fire off 10 questions, right?
Yep.
Most of them would be sort of like one word answers, but if you want to expand on a couple of them, fine. All right. So Tea or coffee?
Yes.
No, but pick one. Tea or coffee?
Oh, no, you didn't say I had to pick one. I drink them both. I drink coffee in the morning and I drink tea in the afternoon.
Fair
Come on, I was
enough.
born in England, and
Okay.
come on.
Okay, books you wish you'd written.
Oh boy, there are just so many. Boy, that's a hard one. One word answer. Johnny got his gun.
Okay. Place that feels like home.
Wherever I am.
A historical figure you'd most like to have a drink with.
My dad.
What's the first book that truly moved you?
Johnny got his gun.
Okay. If writing didn't exist, what would you be doing?
Watching TV.
What's the best writing advice you've ever had?
Boy, that's a tough one. Just write. Don't worry about what anybody else says. Just do it.
What's the theme you keep returning to in your work?
I think both my books to date and the one I'm working on now are written as historical fiction, but the issues and themes that are in them are contemporary.
Okay.
They relate to today.
Okay.
In both cases so far, and in the one I'm reading. So I would say it's overlap.
Okay, interesting. What's your biggest creative fear?
Don't really have one. Like, I've lived a creative life. I've been a designer for 40 years and a writer for 5. So I don't worry about it.
Okay. What are you reading right now?
I am reading a book called The Crazies, which is about a land war over wind turbines right here in Montana.
Okay, good. So Dave, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I wish you the best of luck with your novel, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate the talk.